Hey, what's up everybody? It's Kellen here from Start Your Systems and welcome back to Monster Energy Supercross, the official video game 5, where today we're going to be playing a custom replica version of the 2023 Houston Supercross while talking about the 2023 Houston Supercross that happened in real life over the weekend, and a lot to talk about. I am playing as a replica version of Hayden Deegan because, of course, we'll probably talk about him a little bit in this video. But if you never joined us before, you've never been with us on this little soiree, what I normally do is I just kind of make a custom version of the track in Monster Energy Supercross 5 or 6 when it comes out and talk about the real racing. As I was in Houston this weekend to cover the event in the media, I work for RaceX Online. If you don't know that already. But yeah, we're going to jump into it and start chatting about it. So I'm going to start off with the 450s because that's what I usually do, just dissect some of my thoughts about it. The winner, of course, was Eli Tomac. Got it done in rather interesting fashion because I didn't feel like he looked particularly awesome all day long. It took all the way until after the restart when his teammate Dylan Francis went down in the main event that Tomac, in my opinion, started looking more like himself. And he even echoed those sentiments in the press conference and things like that as well. So I don't think it was just my visual looking at him. I think that he himself also felt like things were a little bit off and he had to clean it up. So Sexton did catch him. But then by the time Sexton got to him, Tomac picked it up again and just kind of pulled away from Chase. And that was kind of it. So it was a weird race because in one sense, it seemed like Sexton was going to dominate. And in another sense, Tomac figured out how to respond to whatever Sexton was doing all day long to still beat him. And because of that, it's a little bit, kind of like a moot point, I guess, where like Sexton looks like he's maybe still the best guy in terms of speed over the last two rounds. But, Eli has a win and was maybe going to win the Triple Crown before he crashed. So I don't know. Like, I don't necessarily think that if you're Sexton, you're breathing a sigh of relief to say like, oh, well, I've got his number. It just didn't happen this weekend. I think you got to start winning these races. And so far, it just hasn't really worked out. But, for Eli, it was a great rebound, great turnaround, and pretty much exactly what he needed to do to start kind of limiting the damage that Chase was eating into a little bit, because winning at A2 and then potentially winning at Houston would have brought the points gap down to just one, or maybe even less if Tomac doesn't regroup and still finish second in that main. But he did, and I do think that the restart helped, but it's, everybody does the same thing. Everybody races the same track, and Eli made it work the best for him. So kudos to him. 47th career win, only one behind Ricky Carmichael for third all-time on the wins list now. Of course, Jeremy McGrath on 72, James Stewart on 50, and now Ricky Carmichael on 48, Eli Tomac on 47. Pretty wild that number is going to be potentially reached this year. Just a lot of records falling, but yeah, just a little bit, I don't know. That's what Tomac does, turns it around and figures it out. Like I said, not great for Sexton to be good all day and still not win, but at least he gets good points out of it. On the flip side, Cooper Webb kind of leaves with his head hung between his legs a little bit because he wasn't good all day. He wasn't good in the main event by his standards at least, and leaves losing 9 points to Eli Tomac when he was only 4 back. So now he's 13 back and has a big hole kind of to dig himself out of a little bit here. He was going to be, I don't know, I felt like more in the mix of it after the first two rounds by the time we got east, and we go east and he wasn't in it. And he told me after the race that it was more because he felt that the track would break down more, and he was kind of expecting it to be, sharp cut down corners, maybe the whoops would be jumpers, so on and so forth. And because of that, the bike setup was a little bit off, so he's going to go back and try to work on that. It's interesting to hear the flip side of that was his teammate Aaron Plessinger saying that he felt like he's been working on a lot of stuff settings-wise and actually hit the mark this round. So if the track does break down in Tampa next week, for example, I wonder if it flips again, and then AP's not happy with the setup and Coop is. Interesting dynamic for sure to see how that kind of breaks down over the next couple of rounds. And then, of course, splitting them was Jason Anderson, who got third. And Jason rode a very quiet third, I thought. He was, he got around Plessinger right after the restart and got right to Tomac's back tire, but then never got close enough to really consider passing him. And then Sexton got him, and they both kind of walked away from Jason to the tune of a few seconds by the end. So if you're Jason, you got to maybe just kind of like regroup and say, well, that was my best, most consistent race so far, and I got another podium out of it, so the wins are going to be coming, but you can't keep letting those guys eat points away either, so it's a catch-22 for him as well. The 450 class definitely has a lot of things that they need to think about to kind of limit the damage that Eli's done in the first couple rounds, because it is also the most points Eli's ever scored through 4 rounds of a championship as well, and even to have a huge crash in the midst of it, still lead the championship by 7 points, and be on the roll that he's on, having won the first 3 of the first 4 rounds of the year. I don't know. I just feel like it feels a little bit more distant than it already is with the way that Eli's been riding. So I think Chase needs to win Tampa personally, or at least somebody else, just to, make it so that it's a little bit more interesting than Tomac walking away with this thing. But at least Chase is still close points-wise, and if he gets a win in there, of course, it stops bleeding pretty quickly, but he's got to win something soon. So at least that's what I think of for the 450s. I did want to quickly touch on the fact that Dylan Ferrandis is quote-unquote okay. It's never good to have a concussion, but that is the only situation, I guess, that he's dealing with. There's no broken bones. There's no internal bleeding. There's none of this, none of that. But the concussion was pretty severe. He was out for probably about 2 whole minutes, at least a minute and a half before I saw him actually move his legs from the press box that I was watching. I had binoculars and I was, paying attention pretty closely to what was going on, because I was really concerned when he wasn't moving at all that things were not good. But he did eventually move his legs. He eventually got up with the help of the Alpine Stars team and then walked to the mule almost by himself, even though he was in a neck brace, which was quite remarkable given the way that things were looking. So that was positive to see, but obviously not good that he got a pretty severe concussion out of it. He's going to get some second opinions this week and see how long it is that he's going to have to be sidelined. I would imagine it's going to be more than just like this weekend. I think it'll probably be a couple rounds at least, which Justin Cooper was already going to be racing, and kudos to him in his debut for the 450 class to come away with a 7th. But I don't think that Ferrandis being out for a few rounds means that Cooper races more. But I do think it starts to entertain the possibility that maybe he does race a little bit more, because he's going to be the second guy at Star for the next few weeks. And if he continues to ride like he did this week, I could see Star saying, well, why not keep rolling him out there and keep getting him this experience? Because he looked good, and he looked good late, which is really peculiar. Like, Ken Roxon faded to Cooper, and Cooper passed him on the last lap of the race, which is really weird for your 450 debut. I don't care if Kenny's normally a guy that doesn't hold strong late in the race or not. Like, Cooper to still do that was pretty remarkable. So anyway, that's the 450 class synopsis. I didn't want to take a ton of time spending the 450 class on this video, because I feel like the storyline comes a lot from the 250 class. It's why I chose to ride as Hayden Deegan. And really, it comes down to the rookies making their debut. Obviously, that's like kind of the biggest talking point from Houston. Real quick, though, synopsis-wise, Max Anstey blew me away this weekend. I thought he was way better than I expected for Firepower Honda. He did get a protest inquiry. I'm saying that wrong. Which means that like there was a team that was maybe going to protest him, but it turns out that the reason why that happened was because him and his team forgot to take the bike to impound, which is mandatory for the top 3 in each class. And because of that, a certain team, I'll just say that, was suspecting that there could be foul play, but then when it was explained that it was just like they were celebrating and they have never done it because they've never been on the podium, then everything was rescinded as far as I'm aware. So I don't think that an official protest was filed. At least that's not the case on Monday so far. But we'll see. I don't think anything's coming out of it. So second for Anstey was awesome. Hunter Lawrence was as advertised, wins the opening round. Now he and his brother both have red plates, and I don't know what you can say about Hunter Lawrence other than this is exactly what we expected to see out of him this year, and he's going to be kind of tough to beat if that's what we're going to see out of him this year, because he looked really darn solid, and even Anstey, who was fast all day, couldn't quite catch him or couldn't quite run the pace of him in the main event, so they're going to have to do something more to knock Lawrence back. And then Jordan Smith crashed but still passed J-Mart late, then J-Mart almost passed him back, and then he almost crashed, which allowed the man that I'm riding as, Hayden Deegan, into the fray. And Hayden Deegan, in my opinion, deserves a lot of credit. Now, I know there's so many people that are like, oh my gosh, we just hear so much about this kid, we're sick of it. But to be honest, like, as a member of the media, I try to cover every athlete fairly. And I don't necessarily look at it as like, oh, Hayden Deegan has a huge following, we've got to talk about him. But when you finish 4th on debut and you're arguably the most consistent rider amidst a lot of veterans, like, yeah, that's going to get me to start talking about you in a very positive light. He, in my opinion, wasn't very good in Anaheim for what he should have been. I thought he should have, based on the way that things have been going and the things I've been hearing, I think he should have easily won Futures, even though Benek has been good and they've been riding together. I thought that should have been Deegan's race to lose, and he lost it. So I was a little bit disappointed with that, but this erased all of that this weekend in Houston for me. I thought he was exactly what he needed to be, honestly. In the heat race, he came out guns blazing, which was a little bit different than he was doing in qualifying. I felt like in qualifying he was riding really measured and trying to approach the track as the veterans would, really. Like, find the race lines, find what's going to work and what's not, and then, run a couple fast laps, but don't blow yourself up running the fast laps, and I don't think he did. But in the heat race, I felt like the first 2 laps was like, oh my God, you slow down or you're going to crash kind of level, because he was going so fast. He passed from 8th to 4th in like 2 laps, and he was going fast enough that he would have caught the leaders if he kept doing that. But I think he himself realized, I got to back this down before I crash. And I asked him that afterwards, and he said, yeah, like I kind of realized it's better to just kind of settle up for the main event. Probably a good idea to conserve energy anyway, and it kind of worked because I felt like he was the most consistent rider in the main event. He didn't get the best of starts, which is something that I think he'll work on. And he also didn't look particularly awesome in the whoops really all day, but as they broke down in the main event, nobody looked good in them, so he kind of just evened out. And then, just rode steady, let the crashes happen around him. His teammate Nate Thrasher crashed twice in the sand, went all the way back to 15th. Jeremy Martin crashed on the last lap, which allowed Deegan into 4th in the end. So, I mean, that is just honestly kind of like a veteran ride for a Supercross debut that deserves plenty of talking about, honestly. So that's why I felt like, I needed to give him his kudos. And, I've tried to not like overstate it too much, but it's still a really good ride, and I think it deserved it. And I think you can equally say as much as deserved for Tom Vial, because Vial, in his first ever Supercross, doesn't have a ton of Supercross background coming from France. That, like we have Muscan and we have Ferrandis and we have Cedric Soubeyras, and some of these other Frenchmen come over, Porcel, all the way back to Jean-Michel Bale and guys like those. Like, they come over and they usually have some sort of Supercross experience because there's a French Supercross championship. They grow up around some high-profile athletes. Vial's dad, Frederick, raced professionally Supercross in France and in the U.S., so you'd think that at some point Tom would have really had a go at it, but he was really adamant that like he'd only ever touched a Supercross track like a few times in his life before he even moved to the U.S. And I promise you, back when I was filming with him in October on his second week in Supercross, and I went to the KTM track to see him ride, not the same guy, really. Like, he has learned a lot in a very short amount of time to do what he did on Saturday night, which was not whole shot, but take the lead pretty quickly, lead 2 laps, get passed by Hunter Lawrence, follow Hunter Lawrence for a few laps, get passed by Max Anstie, and then follow Max Anstie all the way up until about 3 minutes to go when he crashed in this corner right here because he missed his rear brake. That was all it was. It was a small mistake. It was minor. It cost him a lot of positions, unfortunately, as he slipped all the way back to 7th. He initially went only back to 5th, but then I think he was a little bit flustered and kind of blew the whoops the very next lap. And that allowed Hayden Deegan and maybe Jordan Smith or somebody else that was right there with him to go by as well. So it was a little bit disappointing in that regard because he had what I would have considered a sure podium locked up and threw it away. But, man, he looked really comfortable. And I think that it's awesome for him that it is East because I think the whoops are going to break down. And I think at tracks like Daytona or like in Atlanta, I think he is going to actually shine really bright. So that was really awesome to see. He deserves a lot of credit as well. I mean, and as too does Chance Hymas and Talon Hawkins, the other debut guys, because Hymas is only going to race a select few rounds, so he doesn't like have his head fully into like a committed series. And he was 3rd fastest in free practice overall, first time out, faster than Deegan, faster than Jeremy Martin, I think he was faster than Moseman too. Like, a lot of guys that, experienced guys that should go out and really just kind of kill it from the get-go. And Hymas was faster than all those guys. And then he ended up inside the top 10 in qualifying, I think. He finished 4th in his heat. He was in 2nd in the main event for a long time. Kind of looked like he lost his way a little bit and got passed by a bunch of guys and then found it and just cruised it home in 8th. That was a solid debut in my opinion, and he's going to have a few more of these to kind of figure it out before he goes back to taking some time off to get ready for Pro Motocross. And then Hawkins got thrown literally into the deep end with this thing because he was not supposed to race 250 East. He was supposed to continue racing Supercross Futures, and we were going to see him at Dallas next and getting, kind of his feet wet in that regard. But then Jalik Swoll spiral fractured his arm 10 days ago, and Hawkins was needed. He's the only other Rockstar Husky guy aside from Casey Cochran, but Cochran is further away from race ready than Hawkins is in terms of a Supercross prep level. And I think they want Cochran to race Loretta's and stuff anyway. So, Hawkins is closer. Like, Hawkins was expected to probably race a lot of Pro Motocross this year. So anyway, he got thrown into the deep end, and he got better all day long. He was 21st in qualifying. He was 7th in his heat race. He rode forward in the main event to finish 11th. He passed forget who he passed on the last lap to get into 11th, but he made passes to get into 11th on the last lap. It wasn't like he was fading. He was actually getting better. So all of those guys, I think, should hang their head really high. They had a lot to be satisfied with in their debuts. And I think that, as much as Deegan's going to get a lot of the hype about it, I think each and every one of those guys deserves a huge pat on the back, because making your pro debut is never easy, and being as consistently solid as pretty much all of them were all day long just proves that they're ready to go and ready to race in this class. And I think that's really cool. And I know some people say, oh, the field is weak. We don't have Shimoda. We don't have Hammaker. We don't have Swole. So we don't have factory guys that would have maybe beaten them. But still, like, they beat a lot of pretty talented guys, regardless of which. So I don't think you can necessarily say that it was all just down to lack of talent. I think that they showed they all belonged. And I think that is a really cool story to continue following and continue developing as it goes a little bit more on the East Coast here. So that's my synopsis from the 2023 Houston Supercross. Hopefully you guys enjoyed my thoughts and opinions as we head into Tampa this weekend for the 5th round of Monster Energy AMA Supercross. I won't be there, but hopefully you guys that are going will have a good time watching and so on and so forth, and hopefully enjoyed watching this video as well. So thanks guys for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next one. So long for now.